Discover the incredible moment that transformed a paralyzed CEO's life, a surprising encounter with redemption. Daniel Summers stared out of the window, his fingers resting listlessly on the arm of his wheelchair. The crisp autumn leaves danced outside, vibrant reminders of the life that slipped away from him in a flash. Just over a year ago, he had commanded boardrooms and inspired loyalty from his team. Now, reduced to negotiating the limitations of his body, he grappled with an identity stripped to its core. The whispering walls of the rehabilitation center felt like a prison where hope was a scarce commodity. Inside, he could hear the laughter of his children echoing in the hallway's sweet sounds of life, but also sharp reminders of the father they deserved but no longer had. Sarah's steadfast presence anchored him, though it brought waves of guilt that collided with his despair. They deserved a husband, a father, not a shadow of the man who had captivated teams and closed multi-million-dollar deals. Every time he wandered through memories of business triumphs, he felt the weight of self-doubt pressed down. Had his years of relentless ambition been built on the fragile foundations of superficial admiration? The thought spiraled in his mind. During group therapy sessions, exposing his vulnerabilities felt like stripping away layers of armor he had relied upon. It was during one of these soul-bearing moments that he met Mrs. Thompson, a nurse whose gaze seemed to see through all the fabrications he clung to. Her seasoned wisdom unfolded as she shared her story, a tapestry woven with threads of grief and resilience. The cracks in Daniel's perceived invincibility deepened when he saw the human face of struggle reflected in her eyes. It ignited a flicker of inspiration within him, threatening to shatter his complacency. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Fueled by her resolve, Daniel unearthed a hidden talent, a passion for writing he had long neglected. Each stroke of the pen fed his spirit, yet the task of distilling his anguish into prose proved daunting. The memories of colleagues who now whispered behind closed doors haunted him. It felt impossible to separate genuine admiration from those masked by jealousy. Each false smile he had once savored morphed into bitter pills that stuck in his throat, and he found himself spiraling into a pit of isolation. As he forged ahead with the memoir, the stakes heightened. An old rival began to surface in the corners of his memory, plotting to dismantle his legacy with a calculated cruelty that came uninvited. The mere thought left Daniel reeling, questioning the authenticity of every past victory. Would he be remembered for fleeting triumphs or as the embodiment of failure and vulnerability? Standing at this precipice, he felt the tug-of-war within him escalate. Racing thoughts collided with an urgent desire for redemption. The future blurred ahead, each choice rippling through Daniel's psyche, pressing on his chest like a heavy weight. Could he reclaim his narrative, or would he remain trapped in a life defined by loss? The walls of his thoughts closed in, suffocating him with uncertainty as the stakes mounted dangerously high. Every heartbeat echoed the question: could he find the courage to defy not just his past but the looming betrayal that threatened everything he had left? Daniel's resolve wavered as the shadows of doubt cast over his progress. The moments he'd spent on his memoir felt like therapy on paper, yet, the deeper he dove into his past, the more it clawed back at him. He could hear the soft click of the keyboard as he typed, punctuated by the haunting thoughts of those who had once considered him invincible. Each chapter demanded not only vulnerability but a confrontation with the fear that his vulnerabilities would make him less of a leader, less of a father, and less than the man he once believed himself to be. Mrs. Thompson's encouragement lingered in his mind, propelling him to continue. Yet, the laughter of his children, floating through the air like an enticingly familiar melody, made it increasingly difficult to focus. It was both a balm and a burden, reminding him of what he stood to lose and gain. His daughter's innocent giggles tugged at strings of his heart, an echo of a life brimming with joy and potential. He had once fed on the adrenaline of the corporate world, feeding his ego with accolades. Now, He craved a different kind of validation, one rooted in acceptance and authenticity. In therapy, Daniel began to discern the nuances of his new roles. Writing his memoir was no longer just about recounting his experiences, it was about uncovering layers of the person he could become. But that journey was fraught with uncharted territories. The realization that he might become an inspiration or that his weaknesses could inspire others stirred a sense of responsibility he wasn't prepared for. What if he could redefine not only his narrative but also that of others like him? As the days turned into weeks, Daniel honed in on the emotional depth of his writing. His memoir morphed into an exploration of resilience born not just from triumphs but from the quiet struggles faced each day. The raw honesty felt liberating yet terrifying. What if his story fell into the hands of the very critics he feared? He dissected his own motivations, a sense of urgency gripped him to create something authentic and powerful, yet the inner critic remained a voice that sneered at his attempts at vulnerability. After one particularly grueling therapy session, Daniel picked up his phone. Heart racing, he scrolled through his contacts until he found Adrian's name, the rival he loathed and feared, the embodiment of his insecurities. Perhaps it was time to confront the ghosts that lurked in his mind, the whispers of betrayal and jealousy that taunted him nightly. With a trembling finger, he typed a message, "We need to talk." The anxiety of awaiting a response caused an unsettling mix of anticipation and dread. Engaging with Adrian meant not just facing his past but confronting the shadows that had loomed over his achievements. The thought sent a wave of nausea through him. Could he withstand the pressure of an old rivalry? Would revisiting their shared history provide answers or deepen his sense of inadequacy? As night fell, Daniel navigated between fear and hope, that feeling of dread creeping back in but always accompanied by a flicker of courage. What if reconciliation or, at the very least, clarity could provide the answer he needed to reclaim his narrative? The response pinged in his inbox, and for a moment, time froze. It was time to meet the impending storm head-on. The reality stunned him. Charging his heart with urgency, he realized that in order to heal, he must also confront, negotiate, and possibly redefine the contours of his former life. The moment had arrived to unleash everything he had bottled up for so long and see whether the shadows of his past would recede or rise up to overshadow him once more. What awaited him on the other side of this confrontation could be the key to unlocking his future, and the moment of truth beckoned closer than ever. Daniel stared at his phone, the screen flickering with anticipation. After what felt like an eternity, Adrian's reply appeared. "Let us meet tomorrow at noon. O'Malley's Cafe." The simplicity of the message belied the tidal wave of emotions crashing through him. This meeting could redefine everything, or shatter him further into the pieces he was just starting to assemble. The night stretched on, filled with the restless rhythm of his thoughts. Would he walk into the cafe as a different man, or merely a facsimile of his bygone self? With the weight of his memoir pressing heavily on his chest, Daniel understood one thing: he needed to go into this meeting armed with honesty, not just about himself, but about Adrian's role in his life. He woke early that morning, his mind a storm of doubts swirling with resolve. He reflected on the concept of accountability that had emerged in therapy. The stakes of this encounter were high, encapsulating not just his confrontation with Adrian but his confrontation with his own unresolved fears. As he dressed, he felt the tie constricting around his neck like the doubts that had haunted him for years. He opted for a blazer instead, an acknowledgement of the professional he was, yet with the understanding that this wasn't just a business transaction, it was a reckoning. O'Malley's Cafe buzzed with the aroma of coffee and distant chatter as he entered. The cozy ambience felt surprisingly welcoming. He spotted Adrian in the corner, an island of confidence surrounded by waves of nostalgia and regret. The sight of his former rival stirred a host of emotions. Resentment flickered alongside a strange sense of empathy. "Daniel," Adrian greeted, his voice steady yet layered with unspoken history. "Thanks for coming." As they sat facing each other, the air thickened with unsaid words. Daniel took a deep breath, the weight of his life's narrative pressing down on this singular moment. "I think we both know why we're here," he said, trying to keep his tone neutral, controlling the urgency within. Adrian shifted slightly, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, it's been a long time coming, hasn't it?" A flicker of vulnerability crossed Adrian's face, cutting through the bravado he always wore like armor. Daniel felt a shift inside him, a sense of shared humanity that had been stifled by their competition. I've spent a lot of time thinking about our past, about how both of us fed off that rivalry, how it drove us to achieve. But I can't help but think it warped us too. Adrian's gaze intensified, and for the first time, Daniel saw the doubt that lived behind the facade of invincibility. You're right. But it feels like we were both running away from something. Their conversation flowed into a territory Daniel had never expected: mutual recognition of their flaws. They spoke about the pressure to succeed, the lengths they went to sabotage each other, and how ultimately, this created a void where connection should have flourished. With every word, Daniel felt the heavy chains of past animosity begin to loosen. He questioned if letting go of this long-standing resentment was the key to moving forward, both personally and professionally. Yet, lurking beneath was a fear of betrayal. What if vulnerability only invited more pain? Daniel, are you writing about this? Adrian's voice pulled him from his thoughts, the question tinged with concern and curiosity. I am, he admitted, the weight of confession liberating yet daunting. And I have to be honest, whether it reflects poorly or positively on me. For a moment, silence enveloped them, settling like new dust on the table. I think honesty is what we owe ourselves, Adrian replied quietly. As they delved deeper into their shared past, Daniel discovered shades of empathy within his competition, a surprising revelation that echoed Mrs. Thompson's belief that exposure could heal. The more they shared, the more Daniel could see the potential of their narrative shifting toward understanding, even hope. The conversation veered into the path of their lives post-rivalry, and Daniel felt a surge of determination. Perhaps he wasn't merely reclaiming his story but intertwining it with Adrian's a dual narrative of mistakes made and reconciled. Suddenly, Daniel realized he had one more question at the forefront of his mind, a lingering doubt that needed resolution. Can we be more than what we've become? Adrian's response hung in the air, filled with suspense. As he opened his mouth, the answer seemed poised to change everything, but the buzz of the cafe and the looming reality threatened to drown it out. What lay ahead may shake the foundations of everything Daniel thought he knew. Can we be more than what we've become? Adrian paused, the question loomed large between them, palpable like the steam rising from the mugs in front of them. Daniel could feel the tension around them shift subtly, as if the cafe itself was holding its breath, waiting for clarity. Adrian's eyes narrowed, searching for an answer embedded in the truth of their history. Maybe, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. But it means facing the truth of who we each are, not just who we've been to each other. Daniel felt a flutter of hope and anxiety intermingling within him. This was the moment he had longed for, yet it felt terrifying. I've spent years defining myself through our rivalry, he confessed, his voice trembling slightly. Every achievement felt tainted because it was achieved against you, rather than beside you. Maybe I'm still leaning on the narrative of competition instead of thinking about collaboration. It's easy to get lost in that, Adrian said, trying to keep his focus steady. We shaped our identities to become these polished versions of ourselves only to prove something to each other. But deep down, aren't we both asking what it means to be authentic again? Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Daniel felt the walls he had fortified around his identity begin to crumble. I want to understand who we are beyond this back and forth. If we dismantle this competitive facade, what does that even look like? Adrian leaned back, considering his response as if calculating the true weight of his newfound vulnerability. For starters, it means we have to acknowledge the damage, the toll it took on us, on our careers, on our friendships. As the conversation unfolded, Daniel began to recognize the nuances of his anger. I held on to resentment for so long, he admitted shakily. I thought it fueled my drive, but perhaps it was simply a crutch. Letting go, does that mean I'm weak? No, Adrian responded emphatically. It means you're strong enough to choose a new way forward. The real challenge lies in letting go of the narrative that binds us to our past. It's about finding the courage to embrace who we can be if we try. For the first time in years, Daniel felt an internal shift toward uncharted territory. It was a world where their identities need not be rooted in rivalry. What if we're not the only ones affected by this? Daniel mused. What if we influence others in our industry to rethink how they define success too? Adrian smiled, a genuine exchange of recognition passing through them. That matters, Daniel. We have the potential to change our story into one of collaboration instead of competition. The thought ignited a sense of purpose within Daniel. He could envision their lives reshaping not just their careers, but the entire landscape of their industry. This realization expanded into possibilities he had never considered before. Do you think we could co-author a piece together? Daniel ventured. Use our experience as a narrative framework for others in similar situations? Absolutely, Adrian replied, leaning forward with newfound enthusiasm. A testimony of transformation rather than just rivalry. It could resonate well. With each word, Daniel felt the anxiety of past failures fading. They were stepping into a world of accountability and ambition together. But a question lingered in the back of his consciousness: could their collaboration survive inherent complexities, or would old habits die hard? As they wrapped up their conversation, Daniel's heart swelled with a mixture of uncertainty and hope. Perhaps their united endeavor could ignite change not just in themselves, but in a broader context. The energy in O'Malley's shifted, an air of excitement wrapping around him, with shadows of doubt still lurking in the corners that he caught a glimpse of Adrian's determined expression, one that mirrored his own desires. Tomorrow, he suggested impulsively, let us sketch some ideas, discuss our vision. This is more than just a meeting, it's the beginning of who we could actually become. Adrian nodded, but the air between them teased with unsaid concerns. As the hum of casual conversations faded into a whirlwind of thoughts, Daniel felt the thrill of possibility intermingled with the fear of exposure. Would this collaboration bind them or betray them? The moment of truth was drawing nearer, and Daniel wondered if they were ready to face the questions that lay ahead. As they parted ways, Daniel's mind raced, questions cascading like a torrent. Was he capable of stepping into this new identity? Or would he find himself retreating to the shadows of their past rivalries? The day loomed with challenges that would test his determination in ways he hadn't anticipated yet. But amid it all, one thought remained anchored: the first draft of their new story was just beginning. What awaited him on the other side of accountability? Daniel woke up the next morning with a knot of anticipation gripping his stomach. The sun streamed through the blinds, illuminating the cluttered desk where scattered papers and half-empty coffee cups lay like remnants of his former self. He had spent years meticulously crafting a facade of success but now felt stripped bare, eager yet terrified for the meeting he had proposed. The hours dragged, each tick of the clock amplifying his unease. As noon approached, he donned a crisp shirt, one that felt foreign against his skin and armor for the vulnerability he was about to expose. A glimmer of doubt flickered in his mind. Was this plan really the right step toward evolution, or just another facade? When Daniel arrived at O'Malley's, he spotted Adrian already seated, a notepad filled with ideas in front of him. The nervous energy radiating from both of them was almost tangible, yet it was mixed with a sense of shared purpose. "Hey," Adrian greeted, and Daniel noticed the slight tremor in his voice. "Ready to do this?" "Ready as I'll ever be," Daniel replied, setting down his things. He took a moment to gauge his surroundings. The bustling cafe acted as a refuge against the tempest of his thoughts. He reached for the notepad, feeling its crisp pages. This would be their brainchild, a synthesis of their experiences and a departure from years of rivalry. "Let us start with our core messages," Adrian suggested, his pen poised. "What do you want people to take away from this?" Daniel hesitated, the words heavy on his tongue. "I want them to see that success can look different. It should be about collaboration, not just competition." Adrian nodded, jotting it down. "Exactly. Changing the narrative. Our narrative could empower others to redefine their paths." There was a fire in Adrian's eyes, the kind Daniel hadn't seen in years. He realized he wasn't just sharing ideas, they were breathing life into a vision that might actually foster change. As they bounced thoughts back and forth, memories of their bitter rivalry, those sharp, competitive moments, slowly started to integrate into their new perspective. Daniel acknowledged how those moments had defined him, but for the first time, he felt their weight lessen. Giving name to the discord had almost softened the sting. They spoke about taking responsibility not just in their personal actions, but in the broader impact of their industry. "Do you remember that pitch we lost together?" Adrian laughed, the sound unexpected yet pleasing. "It felt like the end of the world back then, didn't it?" "I remember thinking it was the sum of all my failures," Daniel admitted, a faint smile creeping onto his face. "But now, I see it as just a stepping stone, a learning moment." "Right. What if we included moments like that? Personalizing it could resonate more deeply with readers," Adrian proposed, excitement ringing in his voice. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, ideas blossoming into tangible concepts. But as Daniel leaned deeper into this collaboration, a nagging question trailed behind him: what if they encountered old rivalries again? What if their histories came to haunt their progress? With each detail they crafted, Daniel confronted the shadows of his past, his insecurities, and the stronghold of competition that had dictated his actions for far too long. He could feel a shift within himself, a recognition that growth sometimes meant stepping into discomfort. But he also felt threads of fear woven tightly next to those threads of courage. "Adrian," he said slowly, "what if we fall back into our old ways? What if the past catches up to us?" The silence hung heavy, a reminder of the emotional gamble they were taking. Daniel could see Adrian weighing the implications of his words, a swirl of vulnerability that mirrored his own. "We face it together, then," Adrian replied finally, resolute. "We hold each other accountable. We make this transformative, for us and those who read it." Daniel let the resolve settle in. Perhaps that was a corner of strength, permission to be imperfect, yet committed. Their collaboration would not be without risk, but the rewards could radically shift both their lives and their industry. As they wrapped up their brainstorming, the excitement of creation entwined with an undercurrent of fear. They were not merely collaborating, they were crafting a new identity for themselves that transcended previous boundaries. Daniel felt the exhilaration of change washing over him, but the specter of their past echoed in his mind. Would this leap of faith bring liberation or doom? In the end, he gathered the notes they had compiled into a neat stack, each page representing a step toward an uncertain future. But wasn't that what growth required? The essence of both fear and hope pulsated through him, signaling a pivotal moment in their journey. As they stood to leave, a sense of determination surged through Daniel. They were not just rewriting their own narrative, they were poised to influence countless others. But lurking just beneath that confidence was a nagging question yet to be answered: would their commitment endure the intricate dance of accountability, or would past habits unravel their aspirations? Each successive day following their meeting, Daniel leaned more heavily into the new venture, spending late evenings submerged in research, new strategies, and crafting narratives that could challenge the status quo. The initial thrill of collaboration had injected fresh energy into his routine, but beneath that adrenaline lay an underlying tension and awareness that all his efforts hinged precariously on their ability to avoid the traps of their past. Daniel's mornings transformed into rituals. He pored over notes and ideas, imagining how he would present their evolving vision. Yet, with each sunrise, doubts crept back in. Was he truly prepared to face the inevitable criticisms of their approach? The industry was rife with cynicism towards anything that veered away from the traditional metrics of success. One drizzly afternoon, as he perused a stack of literature on entrepreneurial shifts towards more collaborative models, a particular quote struck him. "Success is a collective journey," it read, and for an instant, he felt it resonate within him. This was not just about creating a brand or a better work environment for themselves. It was about redefining what it meant to be successful in the first place. The sensation was electrifying, yet the weight of his past loomed larger. He remained haunted by distant memories of cutthroat meetings, public betrayals, and the suffocating pressure to outshine everyone, including Adrian. Real change required courage, and the risk of relapsing into rivalry gnawed at his resolve. Finally, he broached the subject with Adrian during another brainstorming session later that week. What if we initiated a series of workshops or seminars? Daniel suggested, hesitant but hopeful. We could use our experiences as case studies, talk about our vulnerability, how competition stunted our growth, and invite others to share their stories. Adrian's eyes lit up momentarily before his brows furrowed, concern washing over him. That's exposing a lot of ourselves. It could backfire. What if people don't connect, or worse, what if they mock us for our past? That's exactly it. Daniel replied, urgency cracking his usually composed tone. What if we fail? We're asking everyone to relive their failures, their vulnerabilities. That's where the value is. We have to be brave. The tension settled into a thick silence that loomed over them as they exchanged glances. Were they indeed ready to strip away the layers of pretense? The idea terrified Daniel, the thought of being vulnerable driving knots deep into his stomach. But with that very fear, he could feel something shifting within him, a flicker of resolve igniting against the backdrop of potential shame. I think it'll resonate. People need to see the human side of growth, he continued, leaning into the nerves that fluttered in his belly. We can showcase that battling our history strengthened us, taught us to embrace collaboration. Together, they devised a strategy to carry this vulnerability forward. They drafted outlines, encouraging mental engagement through shared workshops and blog content that humanized their journey. However, the terror of failure intermingled with hope, the potential to empower others often felt just beyond reach. As they crafted their messages, Daniel's internal monologue wrestled with an alarming confrontation. What if they opened themselves up to this journey only to face backlash? Doubts began to emerge. Would people really be inspired, or merely judge them harshly for their past mistakes? His solution, he decided, was to reposition his mindset from fear to focus. To reinforce accountability not as a punishing mechanism but as a supportive framework. As a risk-taker within a fractured industry, he could help transform a painful history into a call for unity, and endeavor that could lift not just himself but countless others grappling similarly with vulnerability. But just as he felt the vision solidifying, fate threw an unexpected twist into the mix. He received an email invitation that sent his pulse racing. The industry's most influential summit wanted him to speak about his collaborative efforts. It was a golden opportunity, but accompanied by the terrifying question, would he and Adrian be able to stand on that stage together, naked before the scrutiny of their peers, and share their story of redemption? As he stared at the blinking cursor of his email reply, muffled echoes of self-doubt surged back. What awaited him on the other side of acceptance? Would he find liberation through honesty, or would it propel him and Adrian further down the path of their old rivalry? That threshold stood before him, and the time had come for Daniel to confront not only his past but the very essence of who he aimed to become. Would he seize the moment to transform himself and possibly his industry, or would fear prevail? The moment Daniel pressed send, a rush of conflicting emotions surged through him, a cocktail of anticipation and dread. It was a decision that felt bigger than just accepting an invitation. It was the plunge into a new existence where he could either soar or crash. As he sat staring at the screen, the weight of that choice pressed heavily against his chest. Adrian was still engrossed in his research, oblivious to the precarious choice Daniel had just made. The uncertainty of their future felt like a coiled spring, ready to launch them into unknown challenges. Would Adrian be supportive of this bold step, or would the road ahead prove to be laced with old rivalries and insecurities? The day after the submission of his reply, Daniel attempted to shake off the looming anxiousness. He busied himself with organizing notes, running through several scenarios in his mind about potential questions and audience reactions. But as he prepared, he realized this wasn't just about the speech. It was about himself, undoing years of conditioning that had taught him to armor up against scrutiny and competition. He envisioned standing on that stage, the lights blinding him, and how his words might either inflame old wounds or help others heal theirs. Would he be able to maintain the authenticity he craved without reverting to self-preservation tactics? He knew that true leadership required vulnerability. It demanded a willingness to open himself up in ways that felt counterintuitive. During lunch, he shared his thoughts with Adrian. I'm nervous, but I think this is a turning point for us, don't you? Daniel forced a confidence he did not entirely feel. Adrian's response was cautious. It could go either way. You know how unforgiving our industry can be, he replied. His brow pinched with concern. What if sharing our stories leads to backlash? It's a scary risk. Isn't that the essence of growth? Risking failure to help others? Daniel challenged, his heart racing. But the skepticism lingered like a thick fog between them. They both understood the stakes, and the prospect of feedback from their peers lingered uncomfortably. No longer could they glorify success without understanding the personal prices they had paid to get there, the losses, the dampened spirits, and the silence in the wake of their mistakes. To quell the rising apprehension, he returned to the literature that had inspired him months ago. As he dove into passages about collaboration leading to innovation, the patterns began to emerge across fields, businesses, and even in rich narratives. Those who shared their vulnerabilities sparked change. Was he truly ready to embrace this path that pushed against everything he had learned? The uncomfortable truth hung over him. Stepping into a public role would force him to face his own failings, every misstep relived in the eyes of the audience. As days slipped by, Daniel immersed himself in preparation. He practiced relentlessly with Adrian, aligning their experiences into what felt like a narrative of triumph, a tale of choosing collaboration over rivalry. But even rehearsing felt like standing on a precipice, a thrilling yet terrifying venture that made his stomach twist. On the eve of the summit, Daniel found himself awake in the stillness of night, grappling with a thought. What if this moment, the one they had prepared for, became a fulcrum, marking the transformation of their narrative? In the quiet hours, he mapped out their story once more, laying bare the fears and vulnerabilities he had shied away from for too long. With dawn breaking, he finally understood that this moment was less about what they would say and more about their shared willingness to be seen. Yet, as he would soon discover, the true test awaited him beyond the stage. A sudden email notification flickered on his phone, pulling him from his reverie. An unexpected challenge. A critic, an old rival, had turned the spotlight onto their past mistakes just as they were preparing to unveil their new vision. Would their past render their future futile, or could the authenticity they sought to portray withstand external judgment? Daniel's heart raced, knowing that this might be the ultimate test of their ambition and transformation. Would he buckle under the pressure, or was he ready to confront the adversities head-on? With the dawn came an unsettling mix of clarity and trepidation. Daniel stared at the notification, his previous resolve nearly cracking under the pressure of old wounds freshly exposed. Their past failures were laid bare for public scrutiny, leaving him feeling raw and vulnerable, emotionally naked before a judgmental audience. That he knew he had to respond to the email, not just to quell the critic's venom but to solidify his own stance as a leader willing to confront adversity. There was little time left before they would take the stage. He breathed deeply, attempting to quell the rising tide of anxiety, focusing instead on the urgency of the moment. What's the plan? Adrian entered the room, his voice steady but with an unmistakable hint of worry that mirrored Daniel's own inner turmoil. Daniel turned to him, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. We can't let them dictate our narrative, he asserted, though self-doubt gnawed within. We need to own our past. Be upfront about it. Use it as a way to show growth. Adrian considered this, the tension between them palpable. But what if that backfires? What if they twist our words? Then we make it clear that our journey wasn't flawless, Daniel suggested, emboldened by a burgeoning sense of determination. We have weaknesses, just like everyone else. Acknowledge the struggle, share the lessons. It's time to redefine what success looks like in front of them, authenticity over perfection. The conviction in his voice surprised even him. It felt liberating to carve out a new path, one that rejected the norms of competition and embraced reality. As they fine-tuned their outline, adrenaline surged within him, transforming anxiety into a palpable energy. He envisioned each point they would discuss as an essential part of their personal evolution, not merely snapshots of failure but stepping stones toward newfound strength. The audience's judgment suddenly took on a different color as Daniel imagined them transformed from critics to fellow travelers along a shared journey. Within the hour, doubts resurfaced like pesky shadows, teasing him with the idea that authenticity might still lead to ridicule. He was confronted with the grating memories of prior failures that seemed to echo throughout his thoughts, disappointments that had almost paralyzed him, moments when he had convinced himself he wasn't worthy of admiration. Were they truly ready to walk that tightrope of vulnerability? The summit loomed like a vast canyon ahead, daunting yet inviting. They practiced their delivery, tightening the bond of their partnership artistically, with Adrian refining Daniel's vulnerabilities until they sounded like powerful lessons instead of echoes of failure. Each rehearsal stripped away layers of his self-doubt. Then the moment they had prepared for arrived. Standing backstage, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation, their names being called. The world they were destined to confront seemed gleaming and unforgiving. This was not merely a stage for a speech, this was a platform for transformation. "Ready?" Adrian asked, their eyes locking in a mutual understanding. Daniel nodded, but just before stepping into the spotlight, a thought pierced through the haze. Was he truly ready for this leap? Could he stand before the audience as a symbol of resilience and authenticity, or would he fall victim to his own fears? As they took center stage, faces staring back at them like flickering ghosts, Daniel felt a surge of adrenaline. The stakes had never been higher. He opened his mouth to speak, only to be interrupted by a familiar voice from the crowd, one that sent a jolt of disbelief rushing through him. It was his old rival, the architect of his deepest insecurities, now about to confront him in front of all those eyes. The ultimate test was here, and Daniel's heart thundered in his chest. Would he embrace this formidable challenge, or allow himself to be overwhelmed by past failures? Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he locked eyes with the source of his dread. There was Jason, his former nemesis, the one who had been the measuring stick for every inadequacy he felt. The humiliation of their past clashed with the empowerment he swore to embody in that very moment. "Nice to see you again, Daniel," Jason's voice cut through the tension, laced with mockery. Recognition washed over the crowd, a blend of curiosity and judgment that Daniel couldn't ignore. It was both exhilarating and terrifying to confront the very figure that had represented his self-doubts. Caught off guard but unwilling to show weakness, Daniel gathered his resolve. This was a pivotal moment not just within the context of the speech but for his own psychological resilience. He could use Jason's presence to reinforce his message. "It's great that we can all learn from our experiences," Daniel replied, a small smile playing on his lips. There was a flicker of surprise in Jason's eyes, then a hardening of his expression. Daniel took a deep breath and continued, "That's why we're here to talk about growth. None of us, including myself, have reached where we are without facing challenges, or failures." This was more than a deflection, it transformed the dynamic and shifted the room's energy. As his voice steadied, he felt the weight of self-doubt begin to lift, replaced by a determination fierce enough to dispel old ghosts. Adrian, sensing the shift, chimed in, echoing Daniel's newfound courage. "Exactly. We're all on a journey, and failure isn't just a setback, it's an incredibly important teacher." The audience responded, their initial apprehension waning. This was a different narrative, and Daniel was beginning to own it. As the presentation progressed, Daniel found clarity in his vulnerability. He openly discussed his darkest moments, the projects that crumbled, and the judgments that plagued his mind. With every personal account, he dismantled the pedestal upon which he had placed his past failures, casting them instead as vital elements of growth. Success is not an end, it's an evolution, he emphasized. The more he spoke, the more he noticed Jason fidgeting in the crowd. What started as a confrontation evolved into an unexpected collaboration of sorts. Their shared history became less a battleground and more a platform for shared lessons. There was strength in vulnerability, and despite the challenges of old memories, Daniel began to see Jason not just as a rival but as a part of his own narrative. By the time they concluded, the audience appeared engaged and reflective. Daniel's heart raced not just from the adrenaline of the moment but from the realization that he had transformed fear into strength, and uncertainty into empowerment. As they stepped off stage, Adrian slapped him on the back, a proud smile spreading across his face. "You did it, man. You really turned the tide." "Did I?" Daniel asked, still in a daze from the experience. I mean, did I really handle him well? Adrian nodded enthusiastically. You more than handled it. You owned it. But we can't forget Jason's influence. He pressed the right buttons, and now, I can't shake the feeling that there's more to your rivalry. Daniel felt that familiar ache of uncertainty, but this time, it was tempered by a burgeoning acknowledgement of his growth. Maybe it's time to redefine that rivalry into something of mutual understanding. Perhaps I could reach out, put old dogs to rest. But as he turned to reflect on this new idea, a lingering doubt crept in. What if Jason had been playing a longer game? What if their past wasn't just a lost cause, but a harbinger of future challenges to come? Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The room felt electric with the potential unraveling of their past, and he sensed a confrontation approaching, one that might define not just his professional outlook but his personal journey as well. He knew he would have to face it head-on. Would he connect with Jason and initiate that transformation, or would he retreat back into self-imposed fears and insecurities? Days turned into weeks following the summit, yet the impact of Daniel's speech reverberated through his life in ways he had only begun to grasp. What had initially felt like a battleground of emotions began to morph into a canvas where he could paint a new story for himself, one of resilience, accountability, and growth. Each day, he returned to his desk, writing and refining his memoir. The vibrant, immersive whirl of creativity swept through him, rapidly transforming uncertainty into a palpable sense of purpose. Eager to further explore the budding dynamic with Adrian, he initiated regular brainstorming sessions. Slowly, the tension that once thrived between them gave way to a collaborative spirit, mirroring the exciting vision they had laid out at the summit. They tackled the hesitation that still lingered from their past rivalry, embracing it as fodder for deeper exploration within their work. By intertwining their stories, they aimed to illustrate a universal journey of overcoming self-doubt, showcasing the strength found in vulnerability. Recognition flowed from their evolving partnership. Industry experts began to applaud their authenticity, with people from all corners reaching out to commend their courage. Each acknowledgement bolstered Daniel's confidence, reinforcing the conviction that being genuine resonated far deeper than facade-driven accomplishments ever could. Meanwhile, as the memoir neared completion, Daniel found it increasingly impossible to ignore unresolved feelings toward Jason. The energy surrounding their shared history was no longer one of hostility but of what could become a potential partnership born out of mutual respect and understanding. The more he reflected, the more he understood that confronting Jason again could complete his metamorphosis. He sent a thoughtful message, proposing a meeting, not for a clash but for a candid conversation about their shared past and distinct future. When the day arrived, Daniel approached the cafe with a mix of apprehension and anticipation. He felt different, stronger, more centered in his identity than the old, fragmented version of himself. As he sat down across from Jason, their eyes met, and the familiar pulse of competition was replaced with something softer, a tentative acknowledgement of lessons learned. Thanks for meeting me, Daniel, Jason began, voice measured. I know my presence at the summit wasn't exactly supportive. I appreciate the honesty, Daniel replied, heart racing yet unwavering. That moment forced me to confront a lot of things, including the fact that our rivalry stifled our growth. Jason nodded, searching for the right words. I guess I didn't realize how much we could accomplish together instead of against each other. There's a relief, knowing we've outgrown that. The conversation flowed naturally, exploring the schemes and misunderstandings that had bred their long-standing rivalry. They shared their vulnerabilities, the failures, insecurities, the hollow victories that never quite filled the void. Daniel felt a weight lift as they acknowledged how their once competitive relationship had limited their potential not just personally, but for those who looked up to them. Hours later, they closed with a newfound understanding. Jason extended a surprising proposition: what if we collaborated? We could share our stories from the other side of rivalry, inspire others as we navigate through setbacks together. The idea resonated deeply. Daniel sensed that they were indeed stronger together, rather than apart. He eagerly accepted, realizing that this collaboration could be the pinnacle of his transformation and opportunity to blend their narratives and pave the way for a new, unified message in their industry. Within weeks, they launched a joint project encompassing seminars and publications that celebrated vulnerability in leadership. The response was overwhelmingly positive, reaffirming Daniel's confidence and purpose. People came forth to share their stories of overcoming adversity, while the industry began shifting its perception of success. Recognizing that imperfections could foster authentic growth, Daniel tightly gripped his newly published memoir, the culmination of not just personal but professional metamorphosis, a true achievement shaped by hard-won wisdom. With each page, he documented not just triumphs but the very struggles that had forged him into the leader he had become. Simultaneously, the collaboration with Jason blossomed, transforming former rivals into credible co-authors heralded across their sector. Standing with Adrian and Jason at their book launch, sandwiched between friends and supporters, a sense of solid confidence enveloped Daniel. He had journeyed from grappling with his identity in a wheelchair to becoming a recognized figure of resilience, inspiring thousands with his story of growth. The echoes of his children's laughter played gently in his mind as he savored the completeness of this moment, an individual who had conquered self-doubt and transformed it into purpose. Daniel Summers, once defined by loss, now embodied possibility, showing that success not only flourishes in victories but also thrives in the courage to be vulnerable and to rise from the ashes of adversity. The future feels expansive, rich with the promise of further evolution. Daniel finally understood what it meant to redefine success on his own terms, and for the first time, he embraced his identity not as a competition but as a collaborative journey that could inspire others. This is the moment for true fans of personal overcoming stories to show solid support. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help reach more hearts. Comment your reactions and theories about this inspiring ending. I want to hear from you, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's spread the message of resilience and creativity together.